Hello, this is Dr. Neil Boumpani, and welcome to my channel, YourChild'sEducation.com, where I urge parents to get their children out of the failing American public school systems. First, I would like to ask you not to come to any conclusions until you hear what I have to say. When people come to conclusions just because something sounds as if it does not align with their philosophical, political, or spiritual beliefs, they're often guilty of condemnation before investigation. This kind of action is responsible for keeping us apart as a society. Many Americans have been conditioned to take ideological sides, mainly because our elected officials refuse to debate, discuss, and come to compromises. So we follow their examples. So if you're a person who believes that your position can't be changed, I challenge you to listen. I'd love to hear your side as well. All right. I'm going to talk about my series on culture wars, the issues that divide America. I'm going to be presenting topics that fit into two main criteria. One, the topic is very contentious and dividing America. Two, the topic is one where one or both sides refuse open debate. I'll try not to prove or disprove any of these topics, even if I tend to agree with one side. I only want to address unanswered questions that are keeping many of us from buying into the mainstream narrative. I'm not taking a stance based on ideology, and I challenge others to ask themselves if they are taking either side of the argument only because of their ideology, be it from the right or the left, or have you really considered it? I'd like to begin with three main topics presented one at a time in three separate videos. And these topics will be climate change, vaccination, and gender issues. Okay, so this is an introduction to the series. Here's my perspective. If you're an adult in your 40s, 50s, or older, you may remember how smart you thought you were at 22 or 25. I know I worked hard in college. I took extra classes, graduated with high honors, and made me think that I knew better than most of those old people who did things the old way, at least in the areas of my expertise. Now, most of us outgrow this foolish pride when we're humbled by life. Believe me, I was humbled more than a few times. Today's young people are very much the same in that they believe they know better than us, but they are different from us in that they demand we acquiesce to their leadership. They're called the woke generation. And they believed that before they came along, the rest of us were asleep in the dark. So after years of them listening to far-left teachers and professors, they believe that the patriarchy of the white supremacy and its repressive capitalism is the cause of all evil. They believe that the world will end in just a few years if we not go green. They believe that all police are racist and must be defunded. To top it all off, they believe in limiting the freedom of speech when that speech does not agree with their views. They take pride in the fact that in just a few short years, they have discovered twice as many genders as there are flavors of Baskin-Robbins ice cream. And they insist that the rest of us must address them by their chosen pronouns. If they get their way, and they may, it can only be through a repressive government regulations. Unfortunately, if that happens, they may never get the chance to be humbled by life. If they succeed in overthrowing the freedoms and liberties of democracy and replace it with a totalitarian state, these individuals, who I contend are among the least educated generations in modern American history, if they get their way and they make the rules for all of us to live by, we're in trouble. They have not lived through the challenges that life brings. Everything they know came from their professors, their teachers, and the far left. The problem is that they have just enough education to make them dangerous. And now, if you're a part of this generation, and you have stayed with me this long, I congratulate you. Let me challenge you to consider this fact. Do you know of any civilization, past or present, where all the people agreed 100% with all the policies on everything? If you could find such a place, I'll buy into it. One thing about the woke generation that they may never understand nor admit is how sheltered and coddled their lives have been. Now, my parents' generation lived through the Depression and World War II. My dad was with his battalion when they liberated a German concentration camp. He could never tell this story without explaining how he and the battle-hardened men with him, they could not help but weep at man's inhumanity to man. Now, these Holocaust survivors can say that they lived at the very gates of hell, some only a few steps from the grave when they were liberated. They vowed to never allow it to happen again. Let's talk about older African Americans who lived during a time when they could not even speak to a white person, let alone challenge one. With all of this, I doubt there are many young people today who could understand the experiences of the people I just spoke about. Even my generation can never really understand them totally. Now, it is because of the struggles of the past that our country has demanded that we learn from history or be doomed to repeat it. Some studies suggest that the present generation is so deficient in history that they have no concept of the past. They can't imagine a time before cars, before computers. We'll try asking any of them who the first president of the United States was, or how many states we had in the original Union. They are a generation who grew up wearing helmets and knee pads to ride their bikes. They were buckled in their seat belts in the back seats to cars while being surrounded by airbags. In their schools, everyone got a trophy or an award for merely showing up. Very few of them have known real hardship. To many of them, hardship is feeling threatened by opinions that challenge their own. My father's generation would simply pass them off with, they really don't know squat, and paid little attention to them. We can't afford this luxury. I would like to hope that we can reason with some of them, but it's not going to be easy. We simply can't ignore these spoiled children. Unfortunately, they have the support of many in government, in academia, and in the media. I can't believe that all these backers are true believers. I believe many of them have ulterior motives. Can it be that those who control government and the media want to divide us in order to strengthen their places in power? I contend that the goal for many, both on the left and some on the right, is to turn the United States into a Marxist country. You may not agree, and that is fine. I'm just saying it. I can tell you that many young people in this country truly believe that Marxism is the only way to a utopian, socially just society. I wonder if these young people will accept a totalitarian Marxist government that will have no tolerance for demonstrations or protests. If they think the police are rough now, wait until the proposed world police force takes to our streets. Once free speech is limited, even in the slightest way, there will be no limits on what government can do to control what we think, what we say, what we do. And we will lose our freedoms and liberties. We're already on the way. A little history can hurt. No history can destroy. Since Western history is not really taught in our public schools, our young people have no idea how illiteracy plagued the world in the past. Our schools are introducing a history that has been rewritten to fit the narrative of the extreme views on the left. We can all agree that traditionally history has been written by the victors of wars, so we can assume some bias. Still, for the most part, as long as we have had freedom of the press and speech, research has been able to either support the traditional view of history or challenge it. History today is simply being rewritten based on the views of these extremists. I would suggest that parents get a copy of their children's history textbooks and look into what your children are actually being taught. Let's look at illiteracy in history. As an educator, I tried my best not to infuse politics into my teaching. I tried my best to encourage students to learn to think for themselves. And I encouraged them to work beyond just passing courses. Now, when I taught college music appreciation to students of all majors, we began our study with the fall of Rome in 479 AD. Before that time, we have almost no written music to give us an idea of the music of ancient peoples. When Rome fell in 479 AD, there were no real governments left in place. Rome was not really conquered, it simply fell apart. And the fall of Rome led to an illiterate society in a very short time. Survival became the only real necessity for most people, and education was simply unavailable to most. It wasn't important. You had to survive first. Now, many students come to the conclusion that reading and writing was something that was still being developed at this time. That's simply not true. Historians really can't account for the fact that in some of the oldest civilizations, like Sumeria and Egypt, there seems to be no account of languages and writing developing. They were simply there. Well, so what makes mass illiteracy after Rome even more shocking is that prior to the fall of Rome, many citizens throughout the Roman Empire, especially those who took part in commerce and government, spoke 2 or 3 or more languages. This included their native tongue, Greek, which was the language of most of the world for centuries after Alexander the Great, and Latin, which became the language of Rome. After Rome fell, the only truly educated class was the clergy of the Roman Catholic Church. Now, some kings and other nobility could read and write, but their understanding was limited. For almost 1,000 years, the Catholic Church held power over Europe by declaring that they were in sole possession of all knowledge by divine assignment. To question any church position could lead to a person's excommunication, which meant an irrevocable one-way ticket to hell after you died. The people believed this because they had no way of checking scriptures. They couldn't read. Even after the Reformation and into the Renaissance, the leaders of the Catholic Church continued to hold sway over many of Europe's monarchs, which meant it held power over the citizens of those countries as well. Scientists like Galileo were threatened with being burned at the stake because his discoveries challenged the church. Now, when the Lutheran Church led the way into the Reformation, Luther translated the Bible into German and encouraged members to actually read the Bible. Now, up to that point, the Catholic Church forbade members to read the Bible and continued to discourage it even to today. There are many priests, the Pope will tell Catholics, don't read the Bible, you can't understand it. Well, the clash of Protestants and Catholics led to the death of millions of Europeans. And finally, there was the Peace of Augsburg, in 1555, may have brought an end to the majority of the bloodshed, but it did not end completely. It was only when people became literate that the Catholic Church's monopoly on all truth began to weaken. Now, our society today is becoming more illiterate with each passing year. Statistics suggest that 54% of American adults can't read on a 6th grade level. Considering that the 12th grade reading level today is about equal to the 5th grade reading level 50 years ago, and we're quickly becoming a country of illiterates. How has the American educational system influenced the last few generations? As I stated above, today's schools do not teach history. One statistic cites that 70% of Mississippi adults do not know enough U.S. history to pass a citizenship exam. Watch some of the videos on YouTube where someone goes up to the average person on the street and asks simple questions about America, and you'll get a good idea of how many young Americans know very little about their country. I think Jay Leno did a series of those at one time. Literacy levels have plummeted, and many students can't perform even simple math. Recently, a study found that among 23 of Baltimore County's public schools, not one student was able to do math at grade level. So if students aren't becoming literate and they can't do math, what are they learning in school? Good question. Now today, when the media reports something that young people do not like, and before any facts can be known, people take to rioting and burning down cities. Even when facts come out and show that the media may have jumped to false conclusions, there are no apologies, little to no media coverage, and our government officials say nothing. I believe these young people are, for the most part, following the example of our government leaders. We're living in a country where our leaders refuse to compromise. Our politicians lie and lie, and they are backed up by the media. When their lies are found out, they're just simply silenced. It's a commonly known fact that all the major media and entertainment companies are owned by only a handful of corporations. So how diverse can media opinions actually be? I'd like to demonstrate the immaturity of this present generation. When a word is spoken that does not align with their views, they label it a microaggression, and they scream for censorship. Now, when conservatives have lectured at public colleges, some schools have immediately hired extra counselors to deal with the trauma that many students would be suffering the next day, even if those students were not present at the speech. Like our elected officials in Washington, there's no room for discussion, debate, or compromise with many young people today. Some get so visibly flustered when a contrary view is offered that they run away shrieking and shaking. Have they been trained to do this by our schools? If a person is told something over and over that one opinion is actually fact, that person will usually believe it, especially in a group setting where everybody else is believing it without question. As Adolf Hitler said, make the lie big, repeat it over and over, and people will believe it. The point I have tried to make is that we are so divided as a nation because people will not sit down, discuss differences, debate contentious topics, or find compromise. Now, if you're a member of this woke generation, how can you justify avoiding discussions with those who hold views that are diverse? How much of what you believe is because you've gone out and gained the knowledge through experience? Can you justify your unmovable views because you gained them through experience? Let me ask this. How much of what you adamantly believe may simply be because you have heard it over and over and never considered a contrary opinion? Matter of fact, you may have been in a class where a contrary opinion was actually brought up by the teacher or professor and explained away. So if you've listened this far, thank you. I will have my first culture war video up very soon. In the meantime, if you liked my video, please subscribe, like, and ring the bell. Also, please visit my website at www.yourchildseducation.com. You can read other articles, comment, and get on discussions. My website and channel is new in 2023, so it may take some time to get noticed, especially since many search engines do not like to put posts like mine at the top of the search engine list. Nonetheless, I hope that you come back. I hope you enjoy my videos. Thank you very much.